We take a little bit of, not really a pause from the conversation of the draft because it is important even in this conversation. But we get back to our What If Wednesday after last night's game 4 in Indianapolis, where the Indiana Pacers take a 3-1 series lead over the New York Knicks, and Tyrese Haliburton just simply goes nuts and puts himself in the conversation of the top 15 best players in the NBA. And we go back to the what if of what if they actually, based on the stuff that we were hearing, traded Ben Simmons for Tyrese Haliburton to the Sacramento Kings, netting you the young point guard. How would things be different for the 76ers? Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast. Here with Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Givens, president of basketball operations at that time. Bree, she might have made that trade. We'll get all your thoughts on this as we go along and discuss it all because of what that man did last night in that basketball game where I am sick that we have to talk about this today. But
You're sick for a number of reasons.
I'm a pro, though, so we'll do this.
What a crazy performance
it
that
really
was, man. Like, the funniest graphic that I saw today was, I think it was Sports Radar. They put together a graphic that was like most passes and yards without a interception, and it was a bunch of quarterbacks, and then Haliburton like number 3. It was like 77 passes for 400 something yards and no picks. Like, truly a video game performance, and one of those that he had like 28 and 10 at halftime. Just
he was one
like
rebound, 2 rebounds,
2
2 rebounds shy of a triple double at halftime. Yeah, it was just insane stuff.
He had control from the very jump.
Just a remarkable performance in a spot where, look, that's a game that if you lose that, and I think the broadcast touched on this last night, Reggie Miller primarily, there's a lot more pressure in that moment when it was tight on Indiana, because if you lose that after winning the first 2 games on the road, all of a sudden the pressure starts building and building and building. Oh, now you got to go to Madison Square Garden and try to get a win. Now you've let the golden opportunity that you created for yourself kind of slip. And so even without a lot of, big time performances up and down the roster, like they got a good game from Mathurin, Siakam played well again. But Haliburton was the guy that, from moment 1 of that game, just grabbed it by the horns and said, we are winning this basketball game.
It really is. You talk about pressure. I don't think anybody really thinks of a team being up 2-1 as having pressure. But when you win 2 games as a road team and go up 2-0, coming back to your home place, how many teams have actually done that where they won the first 2 on the road, came back, and ended up losing a series? It has to be like an infinitely small number. You just don't do that. So, yeah, especially with the way they lost game 3, to then come back, they needed that win. Obviously, it wasn't do or die. It wasn't an elimination game. But, boy, just for the momentum, for the vibes, for the fact that you don't want to be staring down history, that was a huge one. And he really was. Like, I forget exactly what he had in the first quarter, but he took over that game right from the jump. From pushing in transition to, obviously the mistake-free basketball, and 15 assists with 0 turnovers is an incredible feat in and of itself, even without the scoring. His journey, his growth has been pretty remarkable. And I don't think one that anyone really saw. Even when we're talking, we're going to go back into the trade, I don't think anybody saw him going from where he was at the time that we would have been talking about this trade to this. And, obviously there's a lot of, he goes to the Olympics, doesn't really play, most overrated player. To this day, really up until this last week, he's received a lot of scrutiny. Even today, there's people questioning whether or not you can actually call him a star. And it's like...
No, you can call him a star.
Oh, no.
The question is superstar.
I didn't want to exactly repeat what was said because I don't really want to give that guy a whole lot
I don't even know what you're talking about, but I'm just saying because I love that
It's a 3-letter acronym. You could probably figure it out pretty quickly.
Okay. Okay.
But he has just excelled. Whenever he's met that kind of, scrutiny, he's pushed forward, and he's really developed an incredible career for himself.
You can even just start at the beginning of the season. Forget about the Olympics or even the overrated part. Just start at the beginning of the season. We saw them where the Sixers picked up their first win of the season in overtime on that Sunday that we were all here because Haliburton hadn't played well in the first 2 games. He goes off against the Sixers and hits a big shot to force overtime, similar to what he did with the shot last minute against the Knicks in the Garden in game number 1, where it wasn't the bouncer, but it was one at the end of the game there where it forced the Sixers into overtime. The Sixers did get the win. Tyrese Maxey had a great game and all, but it continued after that where it was like, oh, well, finally he decides to play well against the Sixers, but then he reverted back to the play that you saw in the first few games for Tyrese Haliburton before that one where he did not play well, and he was being criticized for how he started off the season for the Indiana Pacers, a team coming off of an Eastern Conference Finals appearance a season ago. What is he doing? Why is he not playing well? And that was a big part of the beginning of the season, the narrative for the Indiana Pacers. And then he got it together, and they missed it. Nembhard missed some time. You had Nesmith missed some time. You had other players. James Wiseman, who wasn't even a big part of it, but he was in the beginning of the season, looked like he might have been a rotational piece as a big man. Isaiah Stewart, the same thing. They both tear Achilles and ACLs for their team, and they're looking, what is happening here with this group? But he had to eventually get it right, and he got it right. Making the All-Star team, then becoming, no, he didn't make the All-Star team. Siakam made the All-Star team.
Mm-hmm.
So then, but he rebounded enough to make the All-NBA team at the end of the season because of how he turned around and changed the narrative of who he was this season. And then he carries that overrated piece, to your point, into the playoffs. They handle their business against the the Milwaukee Bucks in that first series. He's talking junk. Remember the Dame Lillard and that storyline?
And I do think that's a big part of why guys don't like him. There's a rep that he has, just number one as a trash talker, but some guys think he's a front runner. Yeah. And it's like,
that's exactly what they
that's
call
when
him.
You talk trash.
That's when you do it, right? So he does that, and everybody's on Dame's side, and then the overrated stuff comes out, and he beats Cleveland, and here he is now one win away on the brink of jumping into the NBA Finals by representing the Eastern Conference. So a crazy run for him right now. He's an unorthodox shooter. You can even say so about his dribbling. He's unorthodox in that way, but he gets it done. So dating back to February of 2022, Tyrese Haliburton was ultimately traded to from the Sacramento Kings to the Indiana Pacers in a 6-player trade. Of course, he and Domantas Sabonis were the two headliners of that deal. But the one that was of importance for the Philadelphia 76ers fans, Kyle, was that there were multiple reports of the Sixers interested in Haliburton, along with Buddy Hield, where Tobias Harris's name was linked with Ben Simmons and going to Sacramento to get off of, or at least Daryl Morey, at least based on the reports, trying to push the Tobias Harris piece, the angle into it, to get off of that contract that he had, that 5 years, 180, and all of it. So that's where we wanted to start here on this What If Wednesday of what if they actually made the deal. You can talk about your reporting back there in 2020, 2022. Derek, yours, of course. But here we are, man, and this guy could have changed a lot potentially for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, so let's spin it back a little bit further, right? Start of the season, the Sixers are tied to, dozens of trade rumors for all different teams and levels of offers, right? One of the most common ones that floated out there was like a CJ McCollum from Portland package that when they got close to the start of the regular season, there was a contingent of Sixers fans that were just like, do it. They got to trade this guy for whatever they can get. And the Sixers ultimately determined, no, we're not just trading Ben for any player, any reason. And at the start of the year, I think there was certainly, we heard some things about what the Sixers might have wanted from Sacramento. I think Sacramento at that time, at the start of that year, was not inclined to say, we're breaking up Fox or Haliburton. And then as the season progressed, you get to January, I want to say they were like 15-22, 16-23, like below 500, not as good as they wanted to be. And that's when in early January, I and we collectively as media started hearing things like, okay, they're willing to split these guys up, right? Like they think they probably need to make a decision between, do you go with Fox or do you go with Haliburton?
Right.
So here's what I would say about the reporting on whether they could have gotten him and sort of what I had heard at the time, not the post hoc analysis, right? Where people are covering their butts and probably saying things now that's not true. I don't think there was as much interest as reported on Sacramento's end in Simmons, specifically because they ultimately chose Fox, right? I think in a world where that front office had determined we're going to keep Haliburton of this duo, there would have been more interest in Ben Simmons specifically. I think what I had heard at the time was that they were probably going to have to offer more than they would have been comfortable with to get a Haliburton, because the Kings were not exactly like chomping at the bit to say it's De'Aaron Fox and it's Ben Simmons, where at the time there's lots of overlap, right? Like they're downhill distributing players. Obviously Fox had more of the early makings of a jumper, but you're still concerned about both of them. Whereas at least in Sabonis's case, you're trading for a big man who brings playmaking, but is also doing like big man stuff that Simmons still to this day really has not done, and is not like a true pick and roll partner the way you would have wanted for Fox. So I'm less certain of at the time there was even a reasonable possibility to make that happen. Now, that being said, because you eventually get to the Harden trade, right, which is not just trading Ben, it's trading Andre Drummond, it's trading Seth Curry, it's trading draft capital. I think if you had gone to Sacramento and you just proposed basically a one-for-one replica or something closer to that deal, I do think you could have gotten a deal done that way. The question that for me is a lot easier to see in hindsight. At the time, you're talking about a pretty big gap in player valuation between Tyrese Haliburton and then James Harden, right? James Harden, who is still ostensibly at that point, well, maybe not in his prime, is in like post-prime territory. And Haliburton is coming off of, he was what, mid-year 2, I believe, when that happened. And is shooting well, is playmaking really well, is doing the things that we know him for, but is not yet a guy that's like, you hand him the ball and he's running the whole team and you just kind of trust him to do that, right? He's still probably at least a year, if not 2 years away from being that level of player. And so I know the Sixers calculus at the time, and frankly, the fan base and the public is saying, look, Joel Embiid has been awesome, right? This team is still very good despite the fact that Ben Simmons has sat out entirely. We need somebody who can help that guy try to go win a title right now. This is not waiting on dividends to pay off later. This is not investing in like the long-term future. And certainly with hindsight, you'd say they should have invested in the future, right? Because they did lose those playoff series. They didn't get into that inner circle of contenders. But that, I think, was largely what informed the view on you need to get somebody who is good enough right now that while Joel Embiid is at an MVP level, which he had been the year before, was that year, and then won the MVP a year later, you got to get him somebody who is ready to help take him to the promised land. I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think some people will hear that and they'll say like, well, but look at how short Embiid's prime was. You needed to focus on the next 10 years. I think there's some validity to that. You'd love to have a 24-year-old Haliburton, 25, whatever he is, right now to play alongside of Tyrese Maxey. But, if, let's say, they close out that Boston series, if they break through one of those years with Harden and they actually make a deep run, would you be sitting here saying like, no, you should have shoved that to the side to plan long-term? I think there was real reason to pursue someone who was in the middle of their prime or towards the back end of it, like James Harden. To Kyle's point, like I have gotten no firm indication that Sacramento was actually interested in Ben Simmons. And even if you then overpay, if they're not fundamentally interested in the core piece of that package, you can't really overpay. You can't be like, well, here's 2 draft picks, take this guy with a new max contract that you don't really believe in. I've gotten conflicting reports, and I've asked a lot of people nationally, some around Sacramento. I've never gotten anyone say like, yes, they were definitely interested. The closest I've gotten is, well, I think they probably would have been, but nobody really knows. And I've got some people who have just flat out denied it. And part of the problem with reporting on this now is if you don't have that 100% locked down, there's no way anyone is going to admit to what actually happened. Like the Sixers cannot sit here and be like, no, we didn't want Tyrese Haliburton for Ben Simmons. Like they can't do that. Ben Simmons is such a broken product at this point that Sacramento can't be like, well, yes, we actually did want to really pursue Ben Simmons hard. Like that, they're not.
You have to get someone who's not interested in working in the league anymore, who worked for one of those teams, who's just like, yeah, I'll give you a tell-all.
So this is one instance where I'm not going to necessarily kill Daryl Morey. Because look, there's enough verifiable things that Daryl Morey has done. You can kill him for that. I don't necessarily need to kill him over a hypothetical that we think maybe might have had a chance of possibly happening if the exact right things happen, because we just don't know. So I do think part of the interesting conversation is, all right, we had this thing that was rumored. We don't necessarily have to dive into whether or not that rumor was true or not, because like I said, it's unknowable at this point. But how does that impact the team, not only over the last 3 years, but also over the next 5 or 6? It's a fascinating what if. There is, and I don't also want to completely give Daryl Morey an out, because quite frankly, if you told him you have to pay the exact same thing for Tyrese Haliburton that you have to pay for James Harden, I think he goes with James Harden in that situation.
Yes.
So either way, like, part of what I started this with is Tyrese Haliburton made a massive jump after leaving Sacramento. Massive. Like, he was nice in Sacramento, 14-7 kind of player. But to Kyle's point, you're not being like, yes, let me give him the ball to run a 2-man attack. Because remember, at this point, Tyrese Maxey hadn't really broken out. So let me give Haliburton the ball to run a 2-man attack with Joel Embiid as we're trying to chase a championship at the latter part of Joel Embiid's prime. He hadn't really shown enough to have you buy in that much. You had to believe this jump that has happened was destined to happen. And I remember my stance back at the time, because obviously we talked about James Harden versus Tyrese Haliburton because there were rumors out there about it. I felt like I was stronger on Haliburton than almost anyone, and I still don't think I would have chosen him over James Harden. It would have been a tough decision to make.
He'll be 26 in February.
Okay.
To your question. But the thing is that's their job, though.
Of course it is.
That's their scouting to figure that out, to look forward, to look at the next few years, however long Joel Embiid has, to see if whatever's working with Ben Simmons or not working, which is why we are in this position that we're currently in, or, hey, if we can get off of it right now and make this move, then we need to do it. And we need to do it right now and project out. Does his playmaking ability, from how many games you've seen so far, playing with this particular guard that he's playing with right now with De'Aaron Fox, how will that then, if he's the lead guy, how will that then translate to playing alongside Joel Embiid? Will that work, and can he hold up? You talk about the size. He's a bigger point guard. He's not 6'9", 6'10" like Ben, but he's 6'5", opposed to where we currently are, where we're still figuring out if Tyrese Maxey at 6'2" can play next to Jared McCain at 6'3", and how it all works.
But my question is, and I know we got some people we want to talk about.
No, it's fine.
If he comes here and you're playing a much more half-court game with Joel Embiid, you're not getting some of those transition opportunities that he thrives in, and you're sharing ball handling responsibilities with Tyrese Maxey, does he break out the way that he did in Indy?
Well, I have a bunch of thoughts on that we'll get to later. I want Devon to have some space to cook here.
Well, I'll wait for that, because I wanted to add on to something that you just said there. So I'll wait until we bring that one back up. But I'll just stay on the piece of that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what the scouting is for, to figure that part out. If we give them credit for drafting late in those rounds like they have with Maxey, and even in the second round with the other players that they have, McCain even at 16, then we also have to look at them and say, if you scout this player and you look at this player and you think this player is one that can in fact fit, maybe not as the second best player, but at least the third best player on this team, as you figured out, because Harris was still here and they still liked Harris for whatever Harris was as a piece on this basketball team.
Unless they did that bigger rumor deal that was like him, Simmons for Hield, however,
and all of that. But the point of it is again, that's their job to figure it out. So it's for us to talk about, get information like Kyle and Derek had at that time on who was what and who was speaking about this and what was true and wasn't true. In the end, it's their evaluation that matters to make this decision. And as the dominoes start to fall, the Harden thing happens. It worked for a year and a half, but you eventually moved off of the player that was rumored to be the one that you were discussing here that can't really play anymore. And you got James Harden out of it, but then he leaves, and all of it just follows into it. And I don't know that he would have turned into this, but man, the thing of it, Derek, that you bring up of we don't know if it's true or not, but it's one that it just goes into now our what if series that we have this offseason of the lore of Sixers basketball, just because of so many people before he became this were like, yeah, do it. At that time, I'm on the radio, you guys are writing, also doing the podcast and stuff. And people were like, yeah, go ahead and do it. Because there's a big Sixers community they were already tired of Ben Simmons. The Atlanta Hawks thing didn't happen yet.
I would include myself in that community, frankly.
Right. But even when he was making the All-Star team and making the All-NBA team, people were already ticked off. So when you were saying, hey, I'm evaluating this play over here in Sacramento, he looks like he can play a little bit. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do it. So the Sixer fans were, before he became this Tyrese Haliburton, to your question, there were a good part of them that said, yeah, let's do it.
And I will say on the wavelength that you're on right now, Devon, I think one of the reasons you would ding Morey, if it was possible to make this happen, is like, this is like his type of player, in that Haliburton has never had a production issue, right? Wildly productive player in college, productive as a rookie, was super productive despite the lack of winning in the start of the second year alongside Fox in Sacramento. Like, advanced stats tend to like him because great playmaker, doesn't turn the ball over, he creates steals. Like, there are a lot of underlying things that, if you're talking about, this is a person that Daryl Morey, if you just take the names out of it and you just say, these are numbers on a page, and this is, you ding guys or you raise guys based on that. Haliburton is a guy who checks a lot of the boxes that, like, he traditionally has valued in the draft, valued in team building, because I've said this in our Discord, I've said this on the show. Daryl, in many ways, is a pretty simple evaluator, and I mean that in a good way. Like, he looks at guys and says, this guy produced across the board at a high level at a young age. He will probably continue to do so and get better. Like, at the end of the day, that's what scouting is. Some people just say, I'm a tools guy, right? I love the guy who's 6'8" and athletic, and it looks really pretty when he does something. And some people say, well, I care if guys put up numbers when they're 18 and are effective at trying to win basketball games, right? And so that doesn't mean that you would push him in front of James Harden in the priority line at that point based on where the team was at. But certainly he's a player that would be on the radar, that someone like Daryl and other people in their front office would say, that's a valuable piece that we could add to this team.
Where was the Sabonis piece in this? Was this the same time where people were wondering if Sabonis could play next to Joel Embiid as a passing four? Was this around that same time? Because he was still in Indiana, so it wasn't too sack yet, right?
No, well, I mean, he was traded.
No, right. So it was the Indiana Sabonis before, and I wanted to ask that question while it was on my mind. I couldn't remember the timeline of that one. Crazy stuff. When we come back, we'll get Kyle's thoughts on the Tyrese Haliburton, to Derek's question, still play that pace next to Joel Embiid and what that would look like. And maybe we'll hear from somebody else when we get back right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
Well, guys, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we have a local Philly artist that proves it at the Art of Words. Each piece made entirely from handwritten words, like every Eagles player forming the link, every Philly shaping Citizens Bank Park. But it goes far beyond sports, guys. Talking about Boathouse Row, Reading Terminal, Philly Skyline, Jersey Shore. Although I don't know if Mike the Situation and Paulie and all them are in that one. Probably the nicer parts of the Jersey Shore. We'll say wherever they are, these are unforgettable gifts for sports fans, grads, housewarmings, Mother's Day, Father's Day, any occasion. I know my dad has a rooftop bar that he really loves, and he's got at least a couple of these up there. They've been great gifts for him, the gifts that he really treasures. And this is a local guy that you're buying from. Started selling these at the K-Lot and Rice's Flea Market. Philly fans helped launch his career. They are available. If maybe you're not a Philly guy. Maybe you somehow stumbled into this show because we're talking about a Pacers or former Kings player. There are dozens and teams of cities that you can buy something for. There's a little something for everyone. Check it out, artofwords.com. That's artofwords.com, and use code PHLY at checkout for 15% off of your purchase.
And as we are here in the spring, the weather, once it clears up and the rain stops, similar to what we had this past weekend for Memorial Day weekend, and the weather was really nice. A lot of people going down to the shore, traveling together. Well, you want to do so in style when you do travel for your summer trips as well. And if you're looking to ride in style, you're looking for a Jeep or Ram truck, there's only one dealership in South Jersey who has been the market dealer since 1967, and And that's my friends at the cherryhilljeep.com. And they have you covered on the best selection, but most importantly, the best prices. And they're celebrating, as we did this past weekend, the Memorial Day savings all month long. And listen, slide into your Jeep Cherokee this month as we move on and continue through this month of May. Not only is it the most awarded SUV ever, it was also named Motor Week's best midsize utility vehicle for the past 2 years in a row. That's in addition to being a 2024 IIHS top safety pick, or maybe pull away in the most luxurious functional pickup truck on the market today, the 2025 Ram 1500, receiving most coveted award in the pickup truck industry, and that's the 2025 Motor Trend Truck of the Year. Stop in today. Tell them PHLY sent you and receive an additional $1,000 for your trade-in. I know people buy Jeeps and Ram trucks elsewhere. I just don't know why. Drive home in your new Jeep or Ram truck today, just minutes from all bridges, or available online 24/7 at cherryhilljeep.com. Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers podcast. And you know what? Bree, let's hear a little bit from the man that we're talking about who had thoughts at the time
Knew this was coming.
of this. Let's get to it.
The deadline, there was like a rumor that the Sixers had turned down a deal for me that was going to get them, they would have got, the Kings would have got Ben and I would have went to Philly. But I never thought anything of it. I still didn't think it was real. Like, no way. Mm-hmm. And like, even that day, Aaron, my agent, always used to, y'all know Aaron. Aaron always he would mess with me a little bit about it, but like, we would just kind of laugh about it. And he called me that morning and was like, yo, I think you're about to get traded. And I'm like, yo, fam, like,
are you serious?
We play Minnesota tonight. Like, stop playing. Like, I just want to, like, I'm eating breakfast right now, bro. Like, get off my phone. You know, Aaron sometimes,
right.
Come on, bro, get off my phone. I called George Niang because he's in Philly. I was like, yo, fam, am I coming to Philly? Like, am I crack over there? Like, if I actually get traded? And he's like, nah, I ain't heard nothing. So I'm like, all right, George ain't heard nothing, because they would have asked him.
Right.
Iowa State.
Right.
So I'm like, who could it be? In my head, I had no clue. Like, not even the slightest of idea who it could be. And then I remember I was on a call. We were on a call with Aaron, but I don't know how. And I swear by this story this day. I don't know if they'll confirm it, but I promise you, like, Woj is the one who told me, like, I think it could be Indy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yo, fam, how are you on the phone right now?
Right.
How do you know? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
shout out to Woj.
And they're like, it's Indy. I'm like, Indy, like, for Sabonis, like, that could be the only way. And then that's just how it went. But for me, it was definitely like, I just want to be a part of, like, building something.
Kyle? He said, "Oh, I might crack over there."
Well,
in Philly.
and so this is always the thing that gets brought up as one of the
that was Paul George's podcast at the time.
All roads run through Podcast P, apparently. So yeah, I mean, this has obviously been one of the big smoking guns to consider as we go back and try to play hindsight. I want to circle back on, talked about how he would have fit here or what he would have done. I think a really important, like, set aside Joel Embiid's style of play, like what he wants and what Haliburton wants, right? Like, they're at odds a lot more than, like, James Harden comes in. He wants to slow it down. He wants to walk it up. He wants to play the methodical way that Joel Embiid mostly wants to, and that they're a hand in glove fit. But you take the players out of it. I think a big reason that Haliburton has gotten to where he's gotten to and has succeeded at the level that he has is because Rick Carlisle leaned into it, right? That was a coaching and organizational decision to say, we are going to play as fast as any team in the league can play, right? Like, try to play at for not as much this year. They scaled it back a little this year. It was a little more situational. But we've seen in the playoffs, and we saw the year prior, they were basically a science experiment of a team, right? They are just running down your throat at every opportunity. You make a shot, cool. We're grabbing the ball immediately and tearing down the floor as quickly as we can. And that is not Doc Rivers. That is not Nick Nurse. And so we have to start with Doc Rivers, because I think if you do trade for Haliburton and in a version of reality where it's Haliburton and not Harden, if and when Doc eventually is, moving on to other places, perhaps the broadcast booth or Milwaukee or wherever else. Right. Do you still look at Nick Nurse as that's the guy who would be our next head coach as the Philadelphia 76ers? I'm not sure, because I think at that point, if you've committed to a future where Haliburton is an integral part of it, if Maxey is an integral part of it. I would guess that you're getting someone who is maybe an even more cutting edge offensive guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe you default to Morey's got the ties to Nurse, and Nurse did have a reputation as an offensive innovator prior to taking the Toronto job. In fact, it's why he was on Dwayne Casey's staff. It's why he was elevated into that role. I've talked many times how it's funny that it has flipped now that people view him as a defensive guy because that's not who he was coming up. But I'm not sure that Haliburton has the same level of success here, not because he's any different of a player, but because the Pacers deserve credit and Haliburton deserves credit for executing it, for having a vision for how to use this guy, for looking at him and saying, yeah, he is a unique player. He isn't the traditional guy just runs 100 pick and rolls and, you know, he averages 30 and 8 or whatever, and is like what many people think of as the modern guard. We're going to take what he does and just amplify it with the roster build and amplify it with the way he plays. And I think that took a tremendous amount of foresight and planning on Indiana's part. I'm not sure that would have happened here for reasons that have nothing to do with Joel
So
Embiid.
let's run this hypothetical out. If it's not Nick Nurse, who do you think they would have considered it? Because there was Griffin,
Do
Monty,
you think D'Antoni becomes a more
D'Antoni.
prominent?
That's
What
what
about
Rod Mid said.
Ime? Ime was that summer, right?
Now he's on the opposite side, right? He's the no nonsense defense guy,
yeah.
and maybe that there are probably some
Or-
benefits to that.
So Atkinson spent that year in Golden State, right?
Yes,
But he was available that summer.
And he took the Charlotte job and then rescinded it and went back to Golden
Right.
State.
and I think that says to me, and he's talked a lot about. I talked with him some pregame one of the Sixers Cavs games this year, just about the value of the not sabbatical because he's still an assistant, but like being able to step back and take the longer view on like, hey, what went wrong? What do I need to do better? Yada, yada, yada. So I'm not so sure he was going to take a head coaching job. Now, if you could take the Sixers job at that time over Charlotte, I do think that's a
Yeah.
pretty
It's a little more
significant
compelling.
upgrade,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Well, it's not bad. Yeah. Right.
But look, I just think probably you think a little bit differently about who you're hiring and why if Haliburton's here and not Harden.
And so my addition to that, because at that time Doc Rivers was here, is just simply, would you have listened to your point guard? And where he talked about that famous clip in training camp about this is not a democracy, and he's talking to James Harden about that. But again, he likes to walk it up. Is it different? You always, you see, it's the few things that you see of Doc Rivers standing on the sideline. It's him leaning over, hand on his knees like he's pulling on his shorts, right? Or the other times where he's just sitting there and he's waving them to run up the floor, push the pace. And the one guy who did push the pace once he gave him the basketball was Tyrese Maxey. So would he, once he realized that he did have that type of player who his strength was not necessarily being in that half court, was, hey, this guy's got it, let's run. It may not be get the ball out of the rim and let's run, but on
pick
rebounds,
it up a little
on
bit, yeah.
rebounds, we're going to push this pace because we have this opportunity. And if Maxey became Maxey at some point, like he did, now you're talking about two guys that are just going to run. Yes, they're going to get scored on, but they are running, and they're going to be able to finish. And we see what it is already with Nembhard. Tyrese Maxey is better than Aaron Nembhard. So we can just look at that right there. The difference is the defense from Nembhard to Tyrese Maxey. Yeah. So that would have been my same question of how would they have adjusted to that. Now, when you get into the half court set where things do get a little bogged down, that's why you go get Siakam, number one, because he can score in the half court.
And that's what you have the big fella for here.
And that's why I was going to lead into the fact that you have Joel Embiid, who is the ultimate half court player because he can run that pick and roll with him. And the ability for him to have that length, finish at the rim on those unorthodox layups that he does because of the attention that Embiid will have as the receiver of those passes when he's knocking down those jump shots. It could have worked. It most certainly could have worked. Then you go into, well, what happens with Harris? Is 12 still here? Do you try to upgrade that a little bit? Do you maybe upgrade another spot on the roster so you can have some more young athletic people that fits the timeline of what this basketball team is? But I think they could have had the best of both worlds with that offense of running because of those two. Joel will run at times, but he's also really good as a trail man where that would work. And then certainly when things got bogged down in the half court, Joel is Joel.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting in part, for example, like the Boston year. I don't think they have a better chance of winning a championship that year with Haliburton instead of Harden.
In 22-23,
Yeah,
you're talking about? Yeah, the full season.
What I think becomes interesting
You
is...
talking about that series?
Yeah.
Could they have beat them in the series, though? Maybe not win a championship, but could they have beaten them in that series?
Harden legitimately won them 2 games
He
that
did.
season.
Yeah, he did.
That series. I think where it becomes interesting is after Harden opts out or demands out, now you're in, chaos. And you end up essentially having, a punted year because you wanted to wait for cap space. And you get Paul George and you're kind of desperate because you don't have all that many great options in free agency. So he's older and injury prone, but it's your best option, or at least you think it's your best option. Avoiding that kind of desperation is really where I think the Haliburton boost comes from. The fact that you're on year, 4 of that trio, or 3. I can't do math on the top of my head. Of that trio trying to, right, because it was 20, 21, 22, so 2, 3. Yeah, you're going into year 4 now. I think I was right the first time. Of that trio trying to learn how to win together. And maybe the first year you don't have high of championship equity, but the year 2, 3, and 4 you do. And now you're staring at Joel Embiid having a, uncertain future, we'll call it, and we'll be a little generous in doing so. You at least have 2 guards to build around. There's just so much more. You're not panicking and playing from behind all the time.
Well, so also, and I probably could have done more research on this previously to figure this out. If you had made that trade, I think it would have required, I think it would have been Harrison Barnes at the time, right?
Yep.
He was the one on the bigger salary number to get into the Ben Simmons contract range because Haliburton was
Still
on his rookie deal. So you would have needed it for matching purposes. Barnes came off of the books in 22. I think the summer of 22 is when his contract was done, right? So while you would have still had Harris, if you get rid of Harris somehow, like if you had made a trade that's more of the healed and all that and all those pieces, potentially you open up that money earlier.
Yep.
Because you have Maxey and Haliburton on rookie deals, and you could potentially get that Harris money out of it. Like that would have required some other machinations, right? But instead of going into summer 24 in
all
free agency and saying, oh, it's the Paul George and the rest of that class, maybe it's earlier, and maybe that just opens up the different opportunities that are there that summer. And so that you get into that, and we're really going into the fantasy world.
Yeah, that's right, because Haliburton was in that Maxey draft, so they lined up perfectly.
Yeah. So you could have either potentially had the money sooner, or you would have had the same spending spree, but it could have been like another guy or more guys than they got last summer, which is an interesting thing to think
also,
about.
then you're just, because you have your 3 in place, you're just not so desperate to try to get the real 2-way half court. You can be a little more selective. You don't have to feel like you're going, because I think they viewed it as, all right, we haven't beaten Maxey. We need to get that 3rd high-level player. If you already have 3, you can go, all right, let's target some role players. Let's target some players that fit. Maybe some players who are younger with less upside, but also less downside risk. You can just, there's optionality if you have those 3 in place.
Definite optionality. We'll talk about more on the other side, because while we just got on a little bit, I do want to add a few things about how I think he would have gotten Embiid some much easier shots and make life a little bit easier for the big fella. We'll talk about that on the other side as we go, what if in 2022, the 76ers actually had a chance to trade for Tyrese Haliburton and did it? We're talking about it right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
All right, guys, if you're working from home, it's time to stop calling plays from the couch. With a TrueMark Financial HELOC Select, you can tap into your home equities line and finally upgrade that home office, build out that better space, or just finish the projects you've been putting off. With a HELOC Select, you get a great low rate, flexible access, you can pull all funds at once or only when you need them, lower rates than most personal loans, and no penalties if you pay it off early. Visit TrueMark.com/PHLY to apply and turn your work from home game into a winning play. Terms and conditions apply. Visit TrueMark.com/HELOC for details. Federally insured by the NCUA, Equal Opportunity Lender, NMLS 404938.
And we get ready for a big game, Game 5 tonight in OKC, where the Thunder are trying to close things out in the West. And if you feel pretty good about OKC at home advancing to the NBA Finals and you want to make a wager, you got to do so with our friends at Bet365, where they have over 90 million users worldwide of live streams as well. 780,000 events each year with early payout access across the NBA and the NHL for their postseason. Bet365 has pioneered the live in-game betting, and with the early payout offers in the NHL, if your team gains a 3-goal lead, instant payout. Boom. NBA, your team goes up by 20. We know OKC has the ability to do that. Well, once again, instant payout right there for you at Bet365. And breaking news from Bet365, our new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5, win or lose. Sign up, use the code PHLY365, deposit 10, and place a bet for $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins or loses. The bonus bets can be used on spreads, totals, player props, futures, and more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, even when the sirens are sounding, just to let you know.
I wonder if people can hear that on the show.
You made a deal. You got it right. And they were coming to look at you saying, you know what? We need to get on Bet365 as well because that is a winner. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we also have to tell you about our summer intro offer. Only for a couple of days here, and that is our $36 summer intro offer right now. Take advantage to become a diehard member at $36. The summer intro offer. You get diehard access. You get a free t-shirt. You get access to the Discord channel where you can go in there and talk it up with all the folks in the community. You also have an opportunity to sign up after this to join us for our second annual golf tournament. Right here, the PHLY golf tournament. So take advantage of the $36 sign up, where you get all the great draft content from Derek and Kyle on the Sixers, Charlie on the Flyers, everything with the Eagles and the Phillies as well. And you can do so by signing up right now, only for a couple of days. So we're telling you right now, it's only a few days. Get in there, sign up, $36 intro offer, our summer deal. And the PHLY second annual golf tournament for us here at PHLY, June 14th, presented by Xfinity. It's going to be at Jaws' Valley Brook Country Club in New Jersey. So when you sign up, become a diehard member, then you can join in and you can play in a foursome out there for your, you show off your golfing skills in a foursome with Rich Hoffman. Rich Hoffman, also part of the PHLY Sixers team here, and you can do that on June 14th. Once again, with Rich Hoffman. There's also a foursome with Fran Duffy, Jamie Lynch, and Tyler Zulli and his dad will also have a team that they're putting together. If you want to hang out and talk about some basketball ahead of the draft, which would be about 10, 11 days away, you can talk to Kyle and Derek as they roam around, maybe with the drink in the hand.
We'll be hydrating.
Maybe hydrating. He will, this one will be. Me and Bree will be out there doing some, talking
Pabst
some
Light,
stuff.
perhaps?
Little Pabst Light, maybe. But you got 2 hours of doing that after the rounds are over. It's from 2 to 7. Go sign up at allphly.com, both to become a diehard member and then also to join us for our second annual PHLY Liberty Open. All right. Easy buckets, though. Tyrese Haliburton, the way he gets these guys, these easy baskets, when we've talked about in the past where Ben Simmons is this fantastic point guard, he can do all these different things. But the one thing that when you would look at it at times, it was, it didn't get him enough easy shots because while his vision was very good, it was often the kickouts to the perimeter for those three-point shots that he may have created, or the offense just simply breaking things down and he finds the open man. We saw it more with James Harden where you find easier shots for Joel, and certainly most of that was in the pick and pop that they had, that pick and roll in the middle of the floor. But Tyrese Haliburton also he finds a way to get these guys some easier looks. And I have to believe that he would have been able to get some easy looks for Joel Embiid if he was in that offense.
And it would certainly look different than it did with Harden, right? It's not the methodical elbow pick and roll over and over again. It's something a little bit different. But the difference with Haliburton, compared to Simmons, certainly, is that he's drawing guys out to him, right? Whatever you think of the mechanics of the shot, you have to respect him as a jump shooter.
The ball goes in the hoop. You can shoot it however the hell you want.
Devon has said it many times. I don't care about the mechanics that thing's going in, right? So that's if you trust it and you work on it and that shot's going in, that's all that matters. So, yeah, I think not just for Joel, but some of these second units, right, where shot creation at a premium, to put it lightly. He juices them up quite a bit. And one of the things you think about is I am unsure of what the exact value exchange would have been. But if you're able to retain all your picks in that trade, right? Or instead of giving up 2 first-round picks, control of 2 first-round picks to Brooklyn, let's say you don't lose control of those picks, and you're getting some of that, the salary relief we're talking about in the shorter term, that opens up more trade possibilities, right? You could have been a team potentially that gets in the mix for Pascal Siakam, right? You could say, hey, we have a contract. We can trade a Tobias Harris and more picks and get Siakam on our team. And then you got the countryman connection between him and Joel. Obviously, we've seen him in Haliburton work, and there are just lots of roads you can go. I mean, frankly, if you're looking at Toronto, you could say, hey, when OG's on the market, you have trade chips to go and get him. And there are just more potentially opportunities to say, we have our guards, we have the playmaking.
Yep.
How do we fill out the rest of this roster in the short term, right? Or to try to get this team from not a contender, right? Because Haliburton wasn't that good quite yet, right? And Maxey still had some growth to go through. But when you're at last season, right? You're in that offseason or the season before that where they lose to the Knicks in 24, right? I think that's a season you could have been aggressive, right? At that point, Maxey and Haliburton are both established players. Who knows what their growth charts look like? But that's when you start saying we can push real chips in. And even then, you could have just used the pick, right? They didn't have their pick in 23. And while it wasn't a particularly high value one, and I don't think that class was anything to write home about in the mid 20s where they would have been selecting, it's at least it's keeping options open, right? And what do we talk about all the time with a team like the Thunder, right? It's not just that they're good, it's not just that they're young, it's that they've retained so much flexibility where they can make mistakes, they can take swings, they can take shots because they have guys on cheaper contracts and just a boatload of picks to say, you know what, if we decide to, we can take a swing. We can go after a big fish on the trade market when they become available, where the Sixers, by virtue of that Harden trade and what happened afterward, were pretty boxed into what they could do during that time period.
And that's a good point with that 23-24 season where Siakam and OG are both traded in season, not only in season, but you're talking December and early January, a month and a half plus before the trade deadline. And it felt like the Sixers were a little bit, they didn't want to make a move at that time because they wanted to see what else would come available, whether that was at the deadline, whether that was in the summer. And it ended up theoretically working out because I think Paul George was somebody that they probably would have had more interest in at that time. But if you had something like Haliburton, maybe you're a little more aggressive when those two players become available because you're not waiting for the biggest name and the best offensive player.
And James Harden also hasn't, burnt his relationship with Daryl Morey to the ground over a contract dispute. Yeah. So a little bit more stable.
And to Kyle's point earlier, maybe you don't hire Nick Nurse, and that factors in the Siakam thing too. And there's all kinds of different ways this could have reverberated. But it makes you a little bit less paralyzed by the moment because you felt like you had to go out there and get that third piece. You have that in place. Maybe OG makes a lot of sense. Maybe you get OG because you want to cover up the defensive warts of the Tyrese and Tyrese backcourt, and he could help out with Joel Embiid. And OG's actually been pretty healthy here of late, and there's just a number of different ways it could have gone.
Now, here's a question I will ask you guys. Do you think in a world where they trade for Haliburton, and Haliburton is at least has a reasonably similar path as what he walked in Indiana, do you think Tyrese Maxey, and importantly, the people around Tyrese Maxey, want him to be here next to Haliburton? Or do they say Haliburton is kind of taken over as lead guard? Do I want to look elsewhere? Do I want to go to a team where I'm kind of the undisputed? It's not to say that Tyrese is wired that way or talks like that, right? He's certainly been someone who's been open to taking on different roles for the team and all that. But he's a clutch client, right? And in a lot of those cases, including in Sacramento with De'Aaron Fox, they want their clients in spots where if they're a guard, wing, center, doesn't really matter, that they're the kind of the forward facing ball dominant guy, right? And it makes sense, right? You want your client to have the most opportunity. You want them to have chances to make all-star teams, bigger contracts, endorsement deals, whatever. And that's harder when you're in a situation where the other guy is probably better and the other guy's going to have the ball more than you.
I think eventually, because of Tyrese Maxey's talent, that he would have shown that he could do that, and they would have been.
And he would have been great in transition.
Exactly.
As an off-ball.
Yeah. Oh, they'd be awesome.
Sprinting
together.
to the corners,
Yeah.
like that would have been great.
And that's why, because we did eventually see it with Harden as his running mate, and now you're talking about a guy who's. Because remember when Harden first got here, he used to want to really push he wasn't pushing the pace, but his way of pushing the pace was advancing the basketball.
Yep.
He would get it to half court to whoever was at half court. Let's go make a decision from there. Oftentimes it was Maxey. Sometimes it was 12, and then it would eventually get to Maxey and Embiid. But we saw it. So Haliburton is totally different, but the idea is the same. And that's why I think that eventually they would have been okay. Because it would have been, in no particular order, it would have been Haliburton, Maxey, and Embiid. Everybody else would have just been the complementary pieces that they were, and not necessarily X'd out. But let's just say in the case of 12, because of his contract, maybe they would have tried to do something differently and try to get another player, to your point, of the Siakam move or the Anunoby move, where they might have tried to do that. I think it would have certainly worked, and I think they would have been just fine with it, because he would have gotten paid. Number one, because he was getting paid. He was going to get paid. Maybe it wasn't going to, though, also because they were going to, on the same contract, how they would have done that. It wouldn't have, remember, Tyrese Maxey Museum, all because he decided to wait a year. How that would have happened, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're on the same timeline because they were in the same draft class, and it would have worked out somehow. But I think he certainly would have gotten paid, and I think they would have been just fine with those two as the young backcourt together with the veteran in Embiid and gotten it done.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I am not saying that I have an inclination to like Tyrese Maxey as a agitator or like, I got to get out of here, right? He is a kid who is about the right things. And as I said before, goes from rookie bench player, thrust into a starting role. When Ben holds out, Harden comes, he's fine, playing next to him in the back. He's been a very adaptable and professional kid when he's had to do any number of things. Certainly adapted to playing next to Joel Embiid, which we've seen some guys can do and not everybody can. He himself has been, awesome about all this type of stuff. I just always wonder that once you get other people involved, and once you only need one or two or three important people to say, look, you're really good, right? And maybe you should look for a situation where you are the guy as the backcourt guy. You are the featured guard. Like, I don't think that would have been a crazy thing to have happen. Now, if that would have happened, Tyrese Maxey, as we know him and on the trajectory that he was on, he would have had significant value, and that could have turned into, something else that's advantageous for the Sixers. But it just shows you, once you get into these what ifs of like, all right, what if they traded for this guy at this moment? It's a complete butterfly effect, right? Because it's not just you take the guy's career and plunk it into Philadelphia, right? It's how does this impact absolutely everyone around you? And I also wonder how Joel would have reacted, right? If Joel, who is absolutely killing people that year, right? And I know people don't really care at this point. Well, how would Joel feel about this? Because they just, the guy's always hurt and he doesn't deliver. But Joel is in the middle of his second consecutive, MVP caliber year. The other guy who has been his running mate for all these years holds out. And you're just still destroying teams with second-year Maxey, Seth Curry, and role players. And you give him a second-year player as the big trade return, right? Like, how does he feel about that? And how does he adapt? And how does he react to? I do think Joel is smart enough and a student of the game where he looks at Haliburton and says, this guy can help me. This guy can help the team. But it's easy to say that.
Know who's another player in 2023 that was traded? Kevin Durant. I don't know.
Could they have gotten in the mix?
I think they had the 6 first-round picks or whatever. It was 4 or 5? I forget exactly.
I don't know.
Well, part of the reason they didn't is because they traded 2 of them to Brooklyn. And they did. There wasn't the iciness between Harden and Durant that was going on. I don't know.
I don't know.
Boy,
let's see. A lot of what ifs. lot of what ifs with this one. Before we get to anything else, news and notes as we kind of pivot from this, they did win last night 3-1 and come back to New York for Game 5 tomorrow. Tyrese Maxey was tremendous. We can talk about that one a little bit more tomorrow leading into it. But OKC tonight has a chance to close it out.
I mean, they're freaking incredible.
I think they got it.
I think it's done.
They won by 2.
Like I said, I think when they got challenged in the last round and they bounced back, like I think that was the moment when I think that was their test.
Escaping the Denver series and frankly getting like an absolute A+ Jalen Williams Game 7, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander Game 7 against Denver. You've seen in this series, like a few of these games have just been their big three. They carried the team, right? And that was not really the case in the second round, right? The Shai had some up and down moments, came through at the end. Jalen Williams was like, he
only had game
long
1
stretches
really,
of that series.
Game 7 was good.
You know, Chet trying to deal with Jokic, even with help from Hartenstein, that's a Herculean task. And Alex Caruso steps in Game 7, but I mean, Chet in that last game defensively,
incredible.
Unbelievable. Yep. Jalen Williams having a great series. Shai put up 49-10 the other night. And that was the moment
Speaking of what ifs,
it's
another show.
Yes. But now we're going from, I think a lot of people have been we're in the parity era, we're in the depth era and all that. And then you look at those three at their ages playing like this and it's like, boy, it could just be them. They could be the team for the next 5 years.
I think there is some truth to the parity era. I think it's just so much tougher to keep a deep team together. But man, if there's one team that's set up to keep their 3 stars in place and just rotate through depth, it's OKC with 1 billion draft picks and a couple of guys signed to under market deals because they wisely use their cap space.
Yes, indeed. All right, so that's tonight, 8:30, Game 5 in OKC, a chance to advance to the NBA Finals. Quick news and notes, only one really. Tahad Pettiford is going back to Auburn.
I was a little surprised by that. I thought he was one that would stay in the draft. So that's a name off the board that we were all kind of interested in.
We were just talking about a couple days. We talked about a couple days in a row last week, I think.
Even if he would have gotten the second round draft pick, sometimes they give you those contracts that
you can get some decent deals now.
Yeah, so that one, he must really said, you know what? Let me just go lock in. It's my team next year. I'll be back next year. And I'll have a better draft.
So look, Drake Powell. If you go back, Miles Bird. If you two are back in school, I don't know what I'm gonna do because we're losing all my guys that I'm kind of excited about.
Better not, because I'm writing about him tomorrow. So please, at least delay that decision a little bit.
Which one?
Powell.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, I look forward
Sign
to
up.
it.
$36 intro offer, so you can go ahead and read that.
Yaxel and Con. I mean, we talked about it the other day, but there's been a couple pretty big. But that 35th pick is starting to get a little slimmer.
Yeah, we keep talking about it. I do think you're starting to see the impact of NIL money. Like Yaxel specifically, there are rumors out there. I don't know what the number is, but there are rumors that he got just a huge NIL deal at Michigan.
Well, and that's why we went on a couple rants earlier in the year of people talking about like Cooper Flag. Like, no, it does not impact people who are lined up for Supermaxes. It does impact people who are lined up for maybe not even getting guaranteed money. That's where the real impact is.
Yeah, so big money there. Pettiford, I'm sure, will get some pretty good money to go back to Auburn, and it's his team next season. Still has a really good coach in Bruce Pearl. And I suspect that we'll be talking about him again next.
I would think so.
Next summer,
very good player
when it comes to the draft overall. So that's the case there. Quick overtime because we're gonna get to the super chat from Brian Pumper, allphly.com.
I can't imagine what it's going to be
TV
about.
Side. First, you know what? Let's go to Marty Bones first, and it feels weird that we never got a playoff series versus the Bucks. How do you think Giannis versus Embiid would have gone?
I mean, it's a great question because earlier in Joel's career, they would put Joel on Giannis for good stretches. Like we're talking like half of the possessions. That would have been fascinating to watch. Unfortunately, it just never worked out, and it doesn't look like it's looking all that great going forward. They're two fun competitors. They're two guys who I think could really. Like, that's one where I think Joel would really take that assignment personally, especially if we're talking earlier career Joel, where he would be tasked with guarding him at times. He had the strength and physicality to meet him at the rim. But Milwaukee was also a team that was like, all right, Joel, if you want to launch 10 threes, we'll live with that too. And would he have been comfortable and confident enough to shoot through that? It would have been a great series to watch. It was one that it felt like it was destined to happen, and it just never worked out.
So I've brought this up on the show before, but part of the reason that I am always lower on if they had just beaten Toronto in 2019, they would have won the title is I think people, because Toronto won, have discounted how good that Bucks team was. And I want you guys to blind guess. What do you think Giannis's averages against the Sixers that season were? Just points, rebounds, assists per game.
Regular season?
Well, yeah, because they didn't play in the playoffs.
34, 12, and 4.
I'll say
34, 12, and 4?
That's what I guessed.
36, 13, and you said rebounds and assists?
Yeah.
36, 13, and 7.
How about 43 points, 16 rebounds, and 8 assists per game on 55.6% from the field? Man. He destroyed them. Now, important context. I think if you actually go back and look when those games took place, I think one was early season, so that was like barely the team that made it there. One was late season in Milwaukee, which was a classic. Joel had I think a 50-point game. Giannis had a crazy game, and I want to say they won that game. And then there was another one that might have been post Jimmy trade, but pre Tobias trade. So basically 3 different versions of the team. So you don't take that and say, Giannis would have averaged 43 points a game against the Sixers.
To destroy Ben.
But man, he kicked Ben's ass in those games. And I think the part of why Toronto won that series was Fred VanVleet had an out-of-body experience for 6 games, right? Him and I think Lowry just shot the lights out. And I don't think the Sixers were that type of team, right? They had JJ, but Tobias did not shoot well during that playoff run. Jimmy was a scorer, not a shooter. Joel was obviously like underdeveloped as an offensive threat at that point relative to who he became years later. So I think people just look at, in the finals, Golden State fell apart health-wise, and so that was a good chance. But everyone always skips past the Bucks, I think, won 60-plus games that year. They were a really good team. And unlike Toronto, where Toronto had some functional depth, the Sixers were like 6 guys and a bunch of question marks. So I really wish we would have gotten to see it. It would have been a fascinating Giannis versus Joel, and maybe that just changes both of their career trajectories, but we'll never know because of Kawhi.
Yeah, never know.
43 points a game, though. That's crazy.
18 rebounds.
Like,
nuts.
That's just,
16,
it's just preposterous.
was.
You look at it and it's like, how is that even a real player that did that in these games?
Yeah. Brian Pumper says, lineup of Maxey, Grimes, VJ, Paul George, and Joel with the rock at the nail. If you're the opposing team, who you doubling off of? How about swapping Ace? I win.
If you double off of Ace, you can get back to him because he's not going to shoot quickly enough to take the open 3.
Brian, I really think he believes he's going to drop one super chat that's just going to drop all of my concerns about Ace. That's not really how scouting works. But Ace is a better shooter than VJ. I agree with you. That's
Correct.
not the part I have questions about.
It's
maybe the off the dribble shooting a little bit, but that's not what you asked about.
Again, it's also very funny. Every single time VJ comes up on this show, we're like, I have major questions about him. Nobody is in here like, man, VJ's the next Anthony Edwards or VJ's the next Victor Oladipo. Or like, if he became Oladipo, that would be, to me, that's the comparison where I feel like the Ace people call Ace Paul George or Kevin Durant. When you're calling VJ future Oladipo, that takes as much projecting to me as the Ace one. So I try to live in the median outcomes, right? I'm just looking at what happens if things go normally for everybody. And again, 3 to 8 for me, it's all just a big cluster. That's all.
All right.
But the Ace people get very mad when you're like, he's not the undisputed third best guy in this class.
Ace people annoy me more than Ace does. Because there's a real, like,
Ace seems like a nice kid.
No,
I don't have anything against
no problem with Ace individually, but there's a real, like, you're an idiot if you don't agree with consensus. It's like, all right, calm down.
People are going to be sick when I put Khan at 3 on my final big board.
All right.
I'm just trolling. Well, or am I?
All right,
don't know?
that'll do it for our what if of Tyrese Haliburton, who is passing all the tests here in this spot as this team is one win away from advancing to the NBA Finals. Game 5 tomorrow in New York to take on the New York Knicks to see if they can.
I have a
the
Knicks-related
series alive.
question for you.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Timothée Chalamet?
He's at least like he grew
Doesn't
up in
bother
New York.
me.
Like he's a real.
Oh, he's a
isn't he?
real
He's
sports
a real
fan.
Knicks fan. so I
Have
don't
you seen the
it
picture of
bother
him
me.
tracking down Landry Fields to get Knicks tickets back in the day?
And Routens.
And he is a child. Like
And
that
Routens.
is,
Apparently he was 14 at that
yeah.
time.
Boy, he looks like he
looked
might
really
be like
young.
9
Yeah.
in that photo.
Yeah.
No, he's a real deal
Yeah.
sports
I don't
fan.
have a problem with him. I mean,
The picture of him and Ben Stiller courtside was absolutely killing me last
Yeah.
night. Just the two of them, like
sitting next
Timmy
to
with
Antonio
the
Davis.
shades, and
He was sitting next to Antonio Davis.
I didn't even notice
Yeah.
that. Honestly, I was so
Yeah.
locked in.
He was on the end seat right there. But yeah, I don't have a problem with Chalamet. Yeah, he's a real Knicks
Yeah.
fan.
He's one of those guys. He feels like he oversaturated in how much you see him, but he hasn't really started annoying me yet. Like
Yeah.
most.
Well,
oversaturated
he
people
definitely
do.
between Dune. He had the critical darling early career with what is it? Call Me by Your Name and some of the other stuff, and then he's the lead in Dune, and that
Right.
propels him to a different level. He does the Bob Dylan movie. Like he just now is at a different level of fame and stardom. I rock with Chalamet.
Yeah, he's
Because I
good.
love the Doom movies. They did justice to the book that I love. So, yeah, look, there's no way he's 14. I had to
That's
look at what his
that's what they said. 14.
That's look at that. That's
I
a
agree.
child.
I agree. It's like 11.
That is
right
a
there.
child. But that's the real Nick fan Chalamet right there.
Yeah.
So
Thank you,
I
Britt.
give him some respect.
Yeah.
And listen, him and Stiller are hanging out in Indiana. That's how much they love the Knicks. So
Hey, Ben Simmons probably gonna produce a movie for him or something next.
Chalamet in Severance season 3.
There you go.
The streets need it.
We'll see if the Garden is rocking tomorrow. I'm sure it will be,
I
at least in
imagine
the
it is.
beginning, and hopefully they can do that. We'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. I have no problem doing that. Today I'm in my feelings.
Hey.
That's crazy. In the super chat last minute here, hear me out. They pick Khan at 3,
Ooh.
and he's their Klay Thompson. Maxey is Curry Light. McCain is Peyton Pritchard off the bench with the green light as he checks into the game.
So we're just giving up on defense completely.
So I was going to say,
Completely.
I love the enthusiasm from That's Crazy and any of the con heads who are out there. The con heads are loving this. But there is a pretty big distinction in that Klay was a very good defender.
Yeah.
And
Really good.
Khan was a good college defender.
Very
We've talked
good,
about
yes.
this a lot.
Yep.
It's how does that translate? And there are pretty severe concerns on there. If he was Klay Thompson athletically, defensively, he's number 3 for me, and I'm not even thinking twice about it.
No, I think athletically
that
he's
guy.
closer to post Achilles Clay, which is the
That's
problem.
yeah. I think he's a bottom 5%
Yeah.
athlete in the NBA.
No, his defense at Duke was really good. Like really, really good. I have very serious questions about that translating. And I have even more questions about translating alongside Tyrese Maxey and alongside Jared McCain. I think it's a real bad trio, especially when the big fella doesn't clean up those messes like he used to.
I'll say this about Khan on the defensive stuff. Plays hard, very smart.
100%,
And
yep.
so, if you are in the Khan
He will
Knipple
be in the
camp,
right spot. It's just they'll shoot right over him.
that and teams will say, hey, bring that guy over
Yeah.
here for a ball screen and I'll make him defend me.
No, I like Clay a lot. I like Clay. I
Clay
like Khan a lot.
Let's get to the world famous roll call to end this.
Thank you, everybody, for
Wednesday.
being here. As always, a little look back at another painful what could have been, what
could have
if. Just
Yeah.
a lot of these in Sixers history. We're going to have plenty
We have-
of
We're not
this
even going
offseason.
deep into Sixers history.
No,
We're
this
just
is
staying right
recent
around-
Sixers history.
Yeah.
This isn't
We
even
all
like,
covered this.
what if they didn't
Yeah.
trade Moses Malone for crap, right? Like this is
Brad
last
Daugherty.
few years, baby.
Brad
All
Daugherty,
right.
man.
Anyway, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to my girl Winona,
Hey, Nona.
to Hedfa, to Bootzilla,
Boots.
to Rick Morse, Sean Ford,
What up,
Brian
Ricky?
Knight, Duck Holiday, Money
What
Marr,
up,
Randy Rubart, Jack Reacher, SB Cole,
SB.
Phi Chi, Darkness.
Turn the lights down. Minnesota? Maybe.
Mom's grandchildren. What up, Mom?
Hey.
Aubrey Davis. Big AD 97.
What up, Anthony Davis?
That's crazy with the super chat. Brian Pumper with the super chat. Marty Bones.
What up, Bones?
With a super chat checking in from, I believe, New Zealand, right? Marty's a New Zealand guy. What up to Marty? We got Jeffrey Stewart. We got INS.
What up, Jeff?
We have the number one Kelly Oubre super fan.
Philly Phil.
Phil W. What up, Phil? I know it's good to see you, Phil, and I know you have a lot of draft takes. So we'll see if they align with ours in the end. I think Phil strikes me as a Trey Johnson guy, I think, right?
Who you signing, Phil? Who's your client?
I think both Ace and Trey were up there.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to.
I'm saying I think Phil is
Phil,
a Trey
drop
guy.
your top 5 right now. Come on,
Let
let's
us
go.
know
I
in
need
the
the top
chat.
5.
Let us know,
DJ,
Phil.
a.k.a. Mr. Sandman.
Bring me a dream.
You
that
better
we get a
love
Game
somebody.
5 win tomorrow.
Come on, Phil. Don't let me down.
Come on, Phil. I
Love
need
somebody,
it.
love
I need
somebody.
it like I need oxygen, just like I need to charge my damn laptop because my computer's dying as we speak. Hey, Aaron.
Type fast, Phil.
Just in for the roll call
What
at
up,
the
Aaron?
end. What up to Aaron? Indeed. Jay the Jungle, John of the Tundra,
What up, Jay?
Jimmy of the Snow.
Hey, Sal. Ramid, what up?
Ramid, I'm out of listen. Unless Bree scrolls, I can no longer scroll because my computer is kaput for the day. Philly 0024 checking in. Habib checking in.
What up, Habib?
Thank you, everybody who was here today.
Nah, Phil let us down.
Yeah,
Come on, Phil.
checked
Maybe he'll
out
get it in
already.
by the end. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the bell icon so you get notifications each and every time we go live. And if you hit the thumbs up button, maybe it'll make Derek like Ace Bailey just a little bit more.
Little bit.
Or maybe not, but it'll help us out in the algorithm. And it will also say to super producer Bree, thank you for doing such a wonderful job each and every day, queuing up videos, putting up super chats, doing all kinds of stuff behind the scenes. We'll be back tomorrow, 3 p.m., Thursday, Friday, and that's the end of our week. Until then, thank you for being here. We'll see you later.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.